So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Adrian Percy with 25 years experience in the agricultural industry. Adrian is a real strong proponent of the development and the adoption of new science and technologies that support global food security whilst conserving the environment. Now, Adrian's had a super successful career. He's led R&D and innovation for well-known crop protection companies, large crop protection companies, as well as supporting venture investment into the agri-tech space, helping support early-stage innovators scale and grow. Now, Adrian's one of life's real good guys, and it's a delight to have him on the guest this week. So, Adrian, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Simon. It is a pleasure, and I'm delighted to be talking with someone from the home country. So very happy to talk to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. No interpretation of any kind of languages or accents, and it makes it a lot easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, we should be able to muddle through this one together.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me, let's take it all the way back, and tell me as a young Adrian, some of the kind of key influences, when you kind of growing up, as it were.
Yeah, so I'm from Southeast London, from a town called Croydon, and those of you who know Croydon will know it's not one of the agricultural epicenters of the universe. So a suburban urban environment, and didn't have a lot of connection with agriculture. Unfortunately, growing up, I have an uncle who's a dairy farmer, but what I did have was a strong connection through science. My father was a chemist and ended up being head of R&D of an international company, and probably, almost accidentally, and it's not probably till much later in life, I realized that, he had inspired or helped to inspire in me, a love of science. I think the other thing that I was very, very fortunate to do from a young age was travel a lot. My father was expated, to various places, including coming over here to the US eventually. And that gave me, an opportunity also to travel. And I kind of had a love, if you like, and a curiosity about other cultures, other countries that has never left me. And that's always been a big part of kind of who I am and what I'm trying to do through my work and personal life as well.
No, that's great. So what kind of countries did you go to when you were growing up then? What do you kind of remember kind of about?
Well, I mean, my father worked in the Netherlands for a while, which is obviously an amazing country in terms of agriculture and completely kicks above its weight, punches above its weight when it comes to agriculture. So I spent a lot of time there. Here in the States, I had a lot of opportunity to travel. I spent a lot of time in southern Spain with a friend down there, and was working in Gibraltar for many years as a waiter in a restaurant during the holidays. So I got to a fair few places, but I used to collect these travel books, even of places I'd never had a hope of ever visiting. So I've got a great collection of travel books, but I think, some of those now I've managed to tick off. But, at an early age, I wasn't always able to get to everywhere I would have liked.
No, excellent. And tell me, so with chemistry and science, can you remember, clearly your dad was a great influence, but was there a time when it kind of really resonated, that you really realized that this was going to be your kind of life's kind of passion?
I think it was, to be honest, actually at university. I mean, it wasn't that I had this, dream from 10 years old. I think I went with, as many kids do, with a choice of subject that I was good at. So I studied pharmacology. So I was more on the kind of drug pharma side than the agricultural side. And slowly kind of started to appreciate and enjoy that as as an intellectual exercise. But then very early on, my university career was starting to wonder, okay, how do I actually use this? Is it a career in the pharmaceutical industry or something else? And I almost fell into the agricultural side of things, but have never regretted it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, most people, it strikes me that most people fall into the agricultural side. And when I say most people, it's really interesting. If you're going through your education and your degree, and you're studying pharmacology, or you're studying some type of sciences, there's a lot of focus normally towards that pharmaceutical kind of side. So tell me, how did you end up finding a job in the ag industry, and then clearly you spent your career in it from then on?
Yeah, so I mean, finding a job is not such an interesting story, but but keeping it and kind of getting connected to the agricultural industry is something that's really, really important for people to really, you know, stay and have a sustained career within this sector. So looking for a job, I mean, you know, with my dream of travel and living abroad, I'll be very honest with you, coming out of university, I was looking at jobs across a number of sectors that got me out of the UK, that got me to sunnier climes and you know, interesting cultures. And in fact, the first job I applied for was a job in the south of France with a company called Rompelink, which was a pharmaceutical, but also an agricultural company at the time, and got the job. And went to the south of France at a time in France, at least, where, you know, English was not you know, as commonly spoken as it is today. And there was a lot of expectations and pressure on me to learn French, you know, early and quickly, which was a big challenge. But I was at the time working as a top...
Beforehand, by the way, did you speak any French before you did that?
I did some O-level French. I was pretty terrible at languages. And even when I was in Spain, to be very honest, because I didn't need to, I hadn't learned, you know, Spanish very well. But when I went to France, I literally had no choice. I mean, from day one in my job, I remember talking to someone who was a autoclave salesman and trying to communicate with him. You know, I think the only reason he stayed on the phone was, you know, autoclaves were pretty expensive laboratory items at the time, and he thought maybe I can get a sale from this guy who's speaking, you know, terrible French. But it went from there. I had a first 6 months that was probably the most challenging of my career to date, you know, getting through that first 6 months. Came out the other side with a you know, a basic understanding of French. But, you know, at the time I was a toxicologist, we were basically testing white powders with numbers. And I had very little connection to the agricultural industry. And I realized as I started to assemble a team around me in my lab that, in fact, you know, every one of us was in the same position. None of us had any connectivity to agriculture. And I could see that the lure perhaps of better pay sometimes in the pharmaceutical industry was going to draw these people away over time. So we started organizing team meetings and kind of team building type sessions on the farm. And so luckily, you know, I was in a part of the world where, you know, there is agriculture. We went to the Camargue for rice production, or to the Rhone Valley for, you know, vineyards or fruit production. And we started as a team, you know, to spend more time with farmers. And of course, my very selfish motivation was to really secure my team in the sector. What it really ended up doing was introducing me to agriculture and securing me. And, you know, I started to develop a real love for agriculture and a real respect for growers and farmers, and realized, you know, how the products that we were, you know, making were really helping transform, you know, their lives essentially, because, you know, these were very important products on the farm. And that kind of sucked me in, if you like. And, you know, I've now got to the point where I'd never leave this sector, because I really do have a respect for it and love it a lot.
Oh, that's great. That really is. It's no, that's great to hear. So it sounds like your career really changed. It sounds like you started away from the UK, sunnier climes. Didn't sound like you were that kind of knew where you were going. And it was really, as you developed in your job, it was that experience with the farmers and the, you know, that side of things that really helps cement your love, you know, for it. Actually.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you don't have an appreciation for the output, you know, of what you do, you know, being in a commercial setting, being in industry is probably not the best place for you. Maybe a university environment might be more suited to that basic scientific, you know, an academic kind of interest and curiosity. But being in industry, you need to have, you know, at least an appreciation of how your products, you know, are being used and what effect they may have. And you know, once I got that, then I was hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had a really fascinating career. So look, you started, as you said, your career as a toxicologist in '91 for Rhone-Poulenc, and then you ended up as the EVP of R&D for Bayer with a team of 5,000 people, really. So, you know, so maybe just, I know that's a real long journey, but maybe on reflection of that journey, maybe just outline for me maybe a couple of, standout moments for you that you reflect fondly on during that time.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest kind of the biggest change in direction I had, or the biggest decision I had, was when I had to decide, do I stay as a subject matter expert in my own field? I can be, if you like, a big fish in a small pond, or do I try to broaden my horizons a little bit and move into a more general management position and take, one step away from actually doing the science? And that was a comparatively easy decision for me. I mean, I never considered myself, and this is probably a great admission, to be a world expert toxicologist that was going to, garner career and the respect, from doing that. I always saw that I had a good scientific understanding and some management potential. And I realized quite quickly that I could, exploit that better in a broader environment than just working in a very narrow field, however important it actually was. So that was kind of one pivotal moment, when I was offered a role completely outside my area of expertise, going in and very much at the mercy of the experts that we had within that department, who were all looking at me like, okay, what's this toxicologist going to tell us about what we do? Because he clearly doesn't have the scientific chops in our domain. So that was kind of another big challenge. But realizing then you lean, you stand on the shoulders, as they say, of these experts and empower them and respect their expertise and learn from them in many ways, ask the right questions. That was kind of the secret, if you like, that I learned in that environment. And after that, I think after they realized perhaps I wasn't a threat to them, but I was actually there to support them and remove hurdles in front of them and roadblocks that they might have, and help them, understand, the priorities that they have in their work. That's when I started to, I guess, be successful to a degree and get opportunities for other roles that, again, were far away from my original training. At which now I'm probably no more than just kind of dangerous if I get involved in toxicology nowadays. So, which is fine by me. That was a great basis, a great foundation. So that's one thing that really stands out. I mean, the other thing is, that I have very fond memories and still try to create those moments, is when you get, those team moments where there's a lot of positive energy flying through the team, where people feel excited about what they're trying to achieve, where they can see a path forward, where they can contribute, where they feel empowered. When you get those moments, and it might come, during a team meeting, or it might be an offsite event or something like that, for me, they give me a rush. And I really enjoy those moments. And maybe the third thing, which sounds a little bit lame, I guess, but, alluding, back to what I was saying earlier about that connection to agriculture, one of the things I've always tried to do is get in on the farm, meet with customers or with agriculturists and talk to them. And sometimes when you realize that a product perhaps you were involved in developing, maybe even on the periphery, has really made a difference in their operation, that again, gives you a sense of, the importance of what you do. And again, it's another affirmation that you're doing something that's good and worthwhile.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, thanks, Adrian. And it was interesting just having a look before you took the big role of the EVP for R&D. I think it was a team of about 5,000 people you were essentially running globally, right? And
yes,
you went from kind of the SVP of Reg before with a team of about 5,000. With a team of about, I think 500, I think it was actually, or something along those lines.
Yeah, there was a few hundred, and so it basically went up, tenfold. I feel that the biggest transformation when it came to the kind of size of leadership groups was when you went from that point where you knew everybody's name, and you may know a little bit, hopefully, about their circumstance and their background and their aspirations at an individual level, to when you're managing a group so big that you really can't know everyone's name or know them. And that is a big transformation. So, for me, that was probably, when I had 100 folks or less, you knew everyone's name and you knew a bit about them. once you get beyond that, then you start to get into a different type of leadership where you're leading a group, where you're trying to, of course, identify individuals that, you feel you would like to, help, evolve their careers and support them. But it becomes a lot about, communication, about setting priorities, about being very clear on what the organization is looking to do, being very clear on what the kind of guidelines are. And you can do those kind of roles, I think, in several different ways, and it really is often dependent on the situation you're going into, but also the personality that you have. So when I took on the EVP role of Bayer Crop Science, they weren't looking for a radical change. They were looking for someone to move the organization forward, to build on what had already been done, to tweak it in certain ways, but also to emphasize certain new areas that we wanted to focus on. It wasn't to kind of throw the whole thing up in the air and start again. And probably I'm not the type of leader that would be great at doing that. So I really enjoy kind of steering the organizations in a new direction. But it's a little bit, when you have an organization that big, sometimes it's like being the captain of an ocean liner rather than a speedboat. And those changes need to be done subtly and carefully, because it's very easy to destroy an R&D organization. It's not the same as perhaps other parts of organizations in the company. R&D is a long-term endeavor that requires, I think, thoughtful change rather than radical change sometimes. Of course, that's a generalization.
No, that's great. That's really good to get the insights, with that, with that as well. So, no, that's great. So tell me though, when you consider where we are now in the world, when I think about the challenges we face, in the world, whether it be environmentally or feeding the world's population by 2050, as it were, how do you view the kind of challenges ahead of us now compared to maybe, not right at the beginning of your career, but, towards the earlier stages of your career? I'm just interested, how far have we evolved, and how much is the question is, how differently do we see those challenges now? How differently do you see them now?
Yeah, I think this story that has evolved around, feeding an ever-growing population has always been there in some shape or form. We've had, obviously, throughout history, famines and droughts and challenges to agriculture. And agriculture, by and large, has always managed to meet those. Sometimes it's taken time, which has been, very tough on populations, but there's always been, a sense of transformation in agriculture. And if you just go back, you can go back millennia to see how agriculture has evolved over time. And, we've moved through, various different phases of agriculture. But I do think that, like many things in our lifetimes today, there is a kind of exponential change going on. And so what I've seen, perhaps at the start of my career, working in crop protection, there was a big concerns about the safety of chemistry. Particularly some older forms of chemistry, which were very effective in the field and very important for farmers, but clearly, if they were misused or misapplied, could have, very serious effects on human health or the environment. And we've got, even disasters to show, what some of those things could be. As time has evolved, we've managed to get rid of a lot of those kind of more dangerous and older forms of chemistry, and now we're working on much more subtle effects. And so that's one change in the kind of crop protection business. But I think the other change is this much more conscious knowledge about the environment and how we want to protect the environment and make sure that even though we have to feed this tremendous population that we have today, but also that's going to evolve considerably, that we can't do it at the expense of the environment. So can we find not only products which are better in terms of helping us to produce more food, but can we do it with a lighter environmental footprint, which is really the great challenge today for agriculture. And it's whether you're in crop protection or the seeds business or anything else. And what's, particularly exciting, is we have a lot of new tools to play with. So this is not something that's unattainable, but we have to get it right in order to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And has that the fact that the environmental kind of concerns, have really, they're very much in the public domain, as it were. Has it changed your personal mission, towards working in the industry and the impact that you want to have to help kind of create this, healthier world?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think probably like many of my peers, I mean, we respect that, up until now, the tools that we've had have been very effective. They've helped feed us, they've helped, clothe us and provide fuel, very important, but we'd all like to see a kind of evolution. And, the evolution can be better chemistry, safer chemistry, or it can be more biological type products, which, don't have, the negative aspects on the environment or potentially human health, or seeing chemical residues in our food that, by and large, none of us really want. But also, digital tools and other, new types of technologies which are now available to us and that have impacted almost every different, sector of our lives. They're now coming to agriculture, and Uber and Netflix and all those other great things that we all enjoy, has not yet hit agriculture as hard or as as well as some other sectors, but that's coming now, and I think that's also going to provide amazing opportunities to produce more food with less, to protect the environment, and to produce types of food that are more nutritious and more in line with what I think the public wants today.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And maybe we'll move on to like your we were having a chat last week about the role that you're doing now in the open innovation kind of agenda and philosophy, that you have to bring, areas across the ecosystem together. So maybe you could just outline a little bit about what you're doing there, and maybe give us an example of a project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work now with UPL, which is a large crop protection, crop solution company. And, we have a philosophy called Open Ag. And, this is really a philosophy that is very simple in many ways. It's that, we have immense challenges in front of us as humankind, and that has to be solved, together. It's not one company that will come with some, silver bullet type technology to solve all of this on their own. It's going to have to come from a variety of sources. And so, our philosophy is, let's work with others. Even competitors, let's work with others to, the benefit of growers and consumers, on new types of technologies. And that involves a lot of collaboration. And happily right now, in the agricultural industry, I think, there has been a series of consolidations with the bigger companies, but this has left the opportunity for a lot of smaller companies to grow up. There's funding for them and new technologies, be they digital or biological, that people are now looking to exploit. And, we're simply looking to work with some of those companies, to the benefit of our organization and theirs, so that we can, bring some of these new technologies to the farm.
Absolutely. And can you give us an example of maybe a project or something that you've collaborated with across the food value chain?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of them. Some of them are confidential, so I can't talk about them. But, for instance, we're working on a new water efficiency product, which is a natural product, which, retains water to a really significant level compared to its volume. And that then releases the water, at the right time to the roots of the various crops that we're applying it on. And, we're working with farmers, first of all. So, we have a great program, for instance, in Ivory Coast with cocoa farmers in a crop that's really affected strongly by climate change. We're working also with application technology, so we can actually, work with external companies who have really unique ways of applying this product, through different routes, so that we can actually get it to the root base of the crop. So again, we're not trying to, do it all of ourselves. We're working with farmers, we're working with other companies, in order to, bring what we think is a really sustainable type solution to the farmer.
Oh, it sounds really exciting. Yeah, really good. And tell me, you mentioned before there's hundreds of these technologies about at the moment, and I know, I know that you've done quite a lot of work with early stage, companies and technologies and innovators. So much capital being pumped into the area. Where are we on that ag innovation journey?
Well, for this round, because again, we've evolved agriculture for thousands of years, but for this round, which probably dates back to the early 2010s. So 2013 is when we see an uptick in external investment from VCs and other groups into, smaller companies, what we're calling this kind of ag tech ecosystem. So that's relatively recent. We've seen literally hundreds. I'm sure there are thousands of these companies emerge in the biological space, the digital space. We see, new types of production systems like vertical farming, which is a really cool, new development, and other types of indoor farming. So all of these now are going through a relatively, I would say immature in some cases, curve, but we're starting to see some first exits, which is really exciting. And I think most of us anticipate that, these companies will start to emerge as, either solo companies, IPO'd companies, or perhaps be bought by, some of the larger companies in the sector and start to integrate those new technologies into their offerings, in the next couple of years. So it's not a mature, VC world that we're in right now, but it's certainly getting to the point where I think we're on the cusp of seeing some of these companies really have big breakthroughs and being successful.
Yeah, no, okay, thank you for that. And are you hopeful when you consider the scale of the problems that we need to solve? Are you hopeful that we've got the technologies and the application to be able to, do that over the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I have no doubt personally that we have the technology and the opportunity to do this. I think what makes agriculture maybe unique is the diversity that we have. So, every country in the world, virtually, not every, but virtually every country in the world has some agricultural base. Some of them are trying to become self-sufficient in food production. Others probably won't achieve that and rely on others to help produce their food. We have large farmers, we have very small farmers, so you go from Brazil, where we have, some farmers who have 500,000 acres in a farm, to India, where the average size farm is, around 1 to 2 acres. So there's very, very different types of farmers around there. And that's maybe the challenge that we face, is how we deploy these technologies into the field and to make sure that they are suitable for these different types of production systems, and that the producers of these technologies and these small companies are really in tune with what the market is needing. I think that's the biggest, challenge that we face moving forward, not the technology itself, because I believe we have that.
Yeah. And what about the adoption? I'm thinking that some of the language and the understanding of the consumer as it relates to some of the science and the technology, how much of a hurdle does that remain, as it were, as a challenge to be overcome?
So I think it's still a hurdle, but I think companies are starting to figure out that they need to be, farmer friendly. They need to be farmer aware. One of the, if you go and visit any farmer, you appreciate immediately that they have a lot of decisions that they make every day. And what they don't have time for, unless they're, really geeky about it, is getting into some of these, digital tools, as an example, and really understanding, how to manipulate and analyze all the data that they're generating or they can generate on their farm. So having something that is simple and understandable and useful for a grower, I think is really important to them. And of course, it has to give them some level of value. They're not just adopting technology for the sake of having some cool new app. They need some kind of outcome that adds value to what they're doing. And so I think the last part in that puzzle is really making sure that that happens. And so, the broad expanse of farmers can adopt these technologies and really get some value out of them, as opposed to just having some of those who are, really interested in the technology and the kind of the, before the crowd, want to look at them. So I think, that broad base of farmers, they have to be serviced, if you like, and that is going to drive adoption.
Yeah, no, got it. Got it. I understand though, from the farmer's viewpoint, there's a lot more transparency now with pricing and data and the value they can extract, from their farm. Is that how you see it now as well?
So I don't like to talk for farmers because they are very opinionated individuals in general, and they won't appreciate me putting words into their mouth. But they certainly have at their disposal now much more data, or can have much more data than they've had in the past. And I know many of them spend a lot of effort trying to understand that data and derive some value out of it and help them make decisions. I think others will tell you, and again, sorry to put words into their mouth, that all of this data is great, but what do I do with it? And I think that's where we have to help those folks kind of understand what they have and what they can do with it.
Yeah, understand. Absolutely, that's great. And tell me, you must be very excited with all the technology you come across and see, etc. And what areas specifically excite you, and what areas you think will be well adopted in the future?
So I like the confluence of technology, where you've got several different technologies working together to provide something that you couldn't have done in the past. So, for instance, the fact now that we can use satellite data or flyover data or drone data and integrate that with decisions that we're making on the farm, I think is really cool. So one of the examples is now you can detect the early stages of disease appearing in your field, or detect the early infestation from an insect species, maybe with a drone. And then what is happening in some places, and will happen more and more, is then you can, basically go and treat those areas of the farm which are, infected first. That, of course, has a huge benefit for the grower, because he doesn't have to wait till the disease takes hold or the insect, is totally infesting his field before he can do a spot treatment and control it early. And that, less cost for him, less cost for the environment, because you're applying perhaps a fraction of the product that you would have normally applied, and you're applying products that really work at the right time, which is also very important. So those types of technologies, when you can have drone systems talking to each other or talking to the farmer, and deploy sprayers or other drone systems to go over and treat that particular area, I think is a really cool example of what the industry is moving towards.
Oh, absolutely. So normally they would just do spot checks. Is that right? In terms of
yeah, I mean, farmers will scout. I mean, they will go into the field. They'll scout their fields regularly. But obviously, if you're able to use a drone service, you can do that much more cost effectively, perhaps more frequently, and perhaps automatically as well. And then get to the point where you can identify problems early and deal with them preemptively, rather than waiting till the problem gets more severe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sounds great. It really does. Sound very exciting. And what about all the challenges? I mean, I looked at some figures with some of the kind of weather issues and what problems in the US, and what it has actually caused the agricultural kind of industry. And it just seems to be kind of getting worse and worse, the weather. How, what can the industry do to help kind of negate some of those challenges? Because it's like scary how much, how much it's costly.
Yeah, so it's true that at a time when we need to be producing more food, it seems that weather has become more and more of an issue, and either severe weather events or effects of climate change, which have become more and more apparent in some parts of the world. And again, I mean, there are many different technologies that kind of are looking to improve that situation, and some of them are much more accurate weather forecasting. So you can look further out and maybe take some preventative action early on, looking at breeding technologies to make crops more resilient to the effects of weather, whether it's heat stress or drought stress. There is a lot of effort going into that. And so these types of things, I think, will improve the situation moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. Absolutely. So Just looking ahead, looking at some of the kind of companies that you would have worked with or seen from an early stage innovation viewpoint, what do you see as being the real kind of challenges that early stage companies face with being able to kind of deliver their innovation or commercialize it and bring it to market?
Yeah, and it really depends, Simon, on which types of technology you're talking about. But agriculture and food production is a very regulated environment, and so regulations cost money. And if you're developing a new biological or a new crop protection chemical, there are significant costs that need to be borne to get that product to market. So that's one simple equity issue that many of these companies have to overcome. And many of them are looking to the larger companies to support their efforts and help perhaps share in those costs, and then obtain, market access, which is another issue for some of the smaller companies. How do we get these products to market? And we're seeing some innovative new business ideas and approaches kind of cropping up in our industry. And, again, they're probably mirroring what you're seeing in other industries like online sales and, digital platforms, which companies are starting, to use. So there are hurdles for these smaller companies, but there are also ways around them that they're all trying to navigate right now.
Yeah. And I was thinking probably more from a viewpoint of the actual molecules that need to be, developed as opposed to a digital platform. And that's quite interesting with the pharma industry. We've seen with the whole COVID situation, the regulatory landscape has evolved and changed and narrowed. And I do hear about some of these 5 to 10 year kind of windows to commercialize, for instance, a new bio-based kind of crop protection solution, for instance. And I'm wondering, can anything be done from that viewpoint? If this is such a drastic situation and we need more solutions, speeding up the regulatory process, is that something that's possible?
Yes, the regulatory process is slow and laborious and expensive. I think, for the starting point, all of us want a safe food supply. So I don't think anybody, whether they're in the industry or outside the industry, would not want us to properly test and understand, the potential environmental and human health effects of any product that's involved in agriculture. So I don't think you'll find any arguments that we need to, have a certain level of regulation. But certainly in terms of speed, some regulatory authorities around the world are now fast tracking, these more sustainable biological type products, countries like Brazil and the US. Unfortunately, Europe is not there yet. And they are one of the biggest proponents of moving in this direction. So I would really hope over time that Europe understands that, to support farmers and to support, a sustainable food supply, they need tools. The farmers need tools to work with. And if you're going to remove a lot of the chemistry from the marketplace, it has to be replaced by other types of either production systems or different types of tools. And so we need to speed up, particularly in Europe, if that's going to be successful.
Yeah. And you do see that happening? You do see that?
I see some early signs, but I haven't seen any of that translated into legislation, which would allow them to be quicker and in terms of getting these products to market. So it's still a very small process. And so that's why you see many of these startups that we've been talking about, they look to the US as a first market, or perhaps Brazil. But even the European-based companies aren't looking as Europe as a first outlet for their technologies because of the time it takes to get products to market.
Absolutely. And you know what? That is a challenge. Because I've worked with a number of these as well. And when you're a small firm based in France with 15 people and you've secured your Series A and you want to hit the US marketplace, it's really difficult to to have that kind of scale or size, and the cultural kind of issues and challenges and time zones with that as well. It probably makes the journey of an early stage company more of a difficult one.
Yeah, although what I see is many of those companies setting up a base of operations here in the US, and whether they're from France or Belgium or wherever, getting first employees here working through the US system, which isn't all that complicated. I mean, it's still scientifically driven, but very clear what you need to do. You know, getting to market first here. So there's a whole plethora of those companies, but of course it's a shame and frustrating that, you know, they can't get to the European market as easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder what are your thoughts on the UK now we're kind of out of Europe per se, and the opportunities open for us to adopt a different ideals on agriculture and technology.
Well, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the UK. I mean, the UK has always been on the, if you look at the spectrum of how regulations are, they've always been on the side of science and a degree of pragmatism in terms of recognizing the value of these technologies for farmers. So now a little bit decoupled from the European Union, they have the opportunity to look at some of these technologies, at least in a new light, and hopefully, you know, start to pioneer you know, some of these technologies for the benefit of UK farmers, but also technologies perhaps which can be, you know, developed and studied in the UK can then become, you know, globally relevant as well. So I really hope that the UK takes this opportunity to kind of jump on board. And there are, you know, there is definitely government funding going on for early stage, you know, startup activity in this sector. They see and recognize the need to transform, you know, our food supply and our agricultural systems. And so hopefully that will filter through, you know, to the benefit of some of these companies.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Okay, Adrian, listen, it's been a wonderful conversation. I could talk with you for hours about this stuff, and but it's been great. Thanks very much for joining us. Really enjoyed the chat with you today.
Thanks so much, Simon. Good to see you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.